Date, am I the a-hole if I uninvite my sister-in-law who's in love with my husband? I decided that we need to be completely removed from sister-in-law's drama/trauma so we can focus on having a healthy pregnancy and family life. I have an appointment with a perinatologist, a high-risk prenatal doc, tomorrow morning that was scheduled weeks ago to check on the baby. My husband ran home because Tina blew up his phone, texting and calling. Now, my husband always texts or calls me on his lunch break to check on me, even before the pregnancy, so I knew something was wrong when he didn't. Since he left Tina on read, she started calling and sending a slew of unwarranted and degrading texts about me and our children, so basically Tina being Tina. He didn't run it by me, but he sent her a long paragraph, which he showed me when he got home, basically telling her off and told her that he would rather never speak to her again than listen to her talk bad about our family. He told her she would never be invited to any of our family functions and that she needed to check herself back into the hospital if she thought their sibling relationship was ever closer than it actually was. He closed it by saying he would let the family know the reason she was uninvited and that he hoped she's either seeing a therapist or would find one immediately. I'm not surprised at his response because the things she said pushed him to that breaking point. I think the worst thing she said was that my 2 miscarriages years ago, which would have been our first child together, was caused because we don't actually belong together and that my body couldn't even carry any of my children to term, 32 and 33 weeks deliveries. I expected her to bring something like this up, but I could tell it really hurt him, and that's why he didn't hold back from her. He then blocked her and told me he's changing our phone numbers. He called his parents and the oldest/bio sister, whom he is close with, and explained to them why she's never allowed to visit our home. He shared all of their text exchanges, and they were mortified. He asked them not to share our address and when we changed to new numbers. They assured us that none of them shared this information with her because she actually asked for his work schedule and mentioned driving up a day early to surprise him. My father-in-law had the most to say, and I get it. It's his baby girl, but he hadn't shared much info beforehand with anyone besides his wife. He said he always knew she had a little crush on him, but after her outburst at our housewarming years ago, they had a conversation about her behavior and she told him that she had been keeping a diary about him since she was a teenager. She explained it was to process her emotions and to challenge negative thoughts. All I heard was that she wrote about him for years. So there's several journals in their home, probably enforcing her beliefs. Apparently, she only stayed away from my husband because my father-in-law kept her in check and was able to get her hospitalized several times for being a threat to herself. I don't know if all her issues stem from her unrequited love for him, typing that just made me nauseous, but I hope she gets the help she desperately needs. He asked that they speak with her about his last text, but that we don't want to know the outcome. They told us they would deal with her and apologized for thinking she had resolved her issues. My in-laws are saints, and I thank them for believing us and keeping her away for all these years. Luckily, she's currently living with them due to her issues, so they're going to speak to her tomorrow morning. The bio sister-in-law called me when we got off the phone with the in-laws. She told me that she was really sorry because she's the one who hooked the new boyfriend and Tina up and suggested that she show him off at the baby shower, but admitted they had only been dating for like 2 weeks. She said she sent the text Tina sent to my husband to her boyfriend, because that's one of her best guy friends and she wanted to protect him, so I'm pretty sure they're probably not a thing anymore. I'm kind of nervous how Tina will deal with 2 rejections so close together. The 2 sisters aren't that close, and she was audibly disgusted to find out that her sister has been pining for their brother all these years. She thinks it started with the older bio brother, Sean, because when Tina was little, she would follow Sean around all the time. He's older, so he went off to college abroad. Tina was about 10, and then he permanently moved to Europe. It seems like the crush transferred to my husband when Sean left. Sean hasn't been back to the States since he graduated high school, and no one really has contact with him, so she said she can't call and ask him about it. I have to admit I'm kind of curious and would have been interested in hearing what Sean had to say, but I'll rest assured knowing our involvement in the whole thing is over. Someone pointed out that Tina is potentially dangerous and could hurt me or our children, and this really scared me. My husband is going to upgrade our alarm system and purchase more cameras. I don't work summers and will most likely be out on bed rest by the time I have to go back to work, so he wanted to ensure the kids and I were safe when he's away from the house. We live about 5 hours away, so she would really have to go out of her way to show up here if she somehow found out where we live. To those that think my husband was intimate with her at some point to cause her erratic behavior, if that were the case, she would have loved to throw that in my face over and over. Plus, a guilty man would have tried to silence her a long time ago to keep me from finding out. You don't have to trust him, but I do.
My parents want me to die so my brother can go to college. When I was 8, my brother Jackson won a spelling bee, and my parents threw him a party with 50 guests and a 3-tier cake. When I won the science fair the next month, they forgot to pick me up from school, and I had to walk home carrying my trophy in the rain. That pretty much summed up my childhood. Jackson was the miracle child they'd tried for 10 years to have. I was the accident that happened after they already had him. He got a nursery with hand-painted murals and a crib that cost more than a car. I got a dresser drawer and hand-me-down blankets. Mom kept every report card, every crayon drawing, every baby tooth of his in labeled boxes. My stuff went straight in the trash. By the time I was 10, I'd learned to stop expecting anything. I started taking care of myself completely. Packed my own lunches, did my own laundry, walked to school alone. Jackson got driven in Mom's car even though we went to the same place. I'd watch them pull away while I started my 40-minute walk, backpack heavy with books I'd bought myself from babysitting money. Teachers thought I was so independent. Really, I just had no choice. The worst part was how they'd gaslight me about it. "We love you both equally," Mom would say while sitting at another one of Jackson's hockey games. I hadn't seen her at any of my track meets all season. You're imagining things, Dad would insist while showing coworkers Jackson's photos, but none of mine. They had a whole shrine to Jackson in the living room, trophies, certificates, photos from every age. I got one school picture on the fridge that hadn't been updated since second grade. When I was 16, I got into the advanced science program at school. Full scholarship to summer camp at MIT, the kind of opportunity kids dream about. I ran home with the letter, finally something so big they'd have to care. Mom glanced at it and said, "That's nice, but Jackson has a baseball game that week, so we can't drive you." The camp was 3 hours away. She wouldn't miss one of his games to give me the chance of a lifetime. So I got a job and saved every penny for college. I knew by then that they'd never pay for mine. Jackson already had a college fund that Mom talked about constantly. "We've saved $40,000 for his education," she'd brag to relatives. When those same relatives asked about my college plans, she'd say I'd probably get scholarships since I was the bookish one. Like being smart was a consolation prize for being unloved. Then when I was 17, I started getting sick. Bruises everywhere, exhaustion so bad I could barely stand. I ignored it for months because complaining got me nowhere in that house. But when I fainted at work and woke up in the hospital, the tests showed acute leukemia, advanced enough that the doctors were surprised I'd been walking around at all. For the first time in my life, my parents looked at me like I mattered. Mom cried actual tears, held my hand during chemo, even slept in the hospital chair. Dad took time off work, something he'd never done for my school events but did now that I was dying. They brought me flowers and balloons and teddy bears, all the things I'd wanted as a kid but never got. For 3 beautiful months, I had parents who loved me. The chemo worked, my counts improved. Doctors said I had a fighting chance if we kept going. I started to believe maybe this illness had changed things. Maybe almost losing me had shown them I was worth loving. Mom even said she was proud of how strong I was. I cried hearing words I'd waited 17 years for. Then Jackson got into Columbia. Not with scholarships or financial aid, his grades weren't that good. But it was his dream school and Mom said they'd make it work. The next day, she sat on my hospital bed with that fake concerned face I knew too well. "Sweetie, we need to talk about your treatment costs," she started. "The insurance only covers so much, and with Jackson's tuition." I stared at her while she explained that they'd have to stop paying for my chemo after this round. That Jackson's education was an investment in the future, while my treatment was just prolonging the inevitable. That I'd had a good life, had I, and shouldn't be selfish about Jackson's opportunities. She actually used the word selfish. About me wanting to not die of cancer so her favorite child could go to Columbia. "We'll make you comfortable," she promised, like that was generous. "But Columbia only accepts students once. Your cancer will probably come back anyway." She said it so matter-of-factly, like she'd already decided I was dead. Jackson needed that money for his dorm room and meal plan and spring break trips. I needed it to live, but that had never been the priority. I looked at her sitting there, the mother who'd held my hand during chemo just long enough to feel like she'd done her duty. Now that Jackson needed something, I was expendable again. Worse than forgotten, actively sacrificed. She was literally choosing his college experience over my life, and she expected me to understand. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I grabbed my phone the second Mom left, hands shaking so bad I could barely unlock the screen. The chemo pump beeped next to my bed while I typed "medical emancipation minor" into the search bar and started reading everything I could find. There were cases, actual cases, of teenagers who fought for their own health care when parents refused treatment. I took screenshots of legal definitions, patient rights laws, stories about kids who won in court. My eyes burned from staring at the bright screen in the dark room, but I kept going, saving article after article about minors seeking medical decision-making authority. The fourth pulled at my arm when I shifted positions, but I didn't care. Every page I read gave me a little more hope that maybe I didn't have to just accept dying, because my parents decided Jackson's dorm room mattered more than my life. By the time the sun started coming up through the hospital window, I had 24 screenshots and a basic understanding of what medical neglect meant in legal terms. My phone battery was at 6%, and my eyes felt like sandpaper, but I finally had something that looked like a plan. Dr. Stone came in for morning rounds around 7, and he took one look at my face and stopped in the doorway. He asked if everything was okay at home, his voice careful like he already suspected something was wrong. I tried to hold it together, but the words just poured out. I told him what Mom said about stopping my treatment after this round, about Jackson and Columbia, about how she literally said my cancer would probably come back anyway, so why waste the money? Dr. Stone's expression changed from concern to something harder, angrier. His jaw got tight and he set down his tablet on the counter with more force than necessary. He asked me to repeat exactly what she said, and I did, watching him get progressively more upset with every word. When I finished, he pulled out his phone and started typing fast, his whole body tense. Dr. Stone told me he was paging the hospital social worker right now, and that I wasn't getting discharged until we figured out every possible option for continuing my care. He sat down in the chair next to my bed and explained in clear terms what would happen if we stopped treatment now. The cancer was responding really well to the chemo, my cell counts were improving. All the signs pointed to successful remission if we completed the full protocol. But stopping now, when we were only halfway through, would be what he called medically catastrophic. He said the leukemia would almost certainly come back within months, probably more aggressive than before, and my chances of survival would drop to basically nothing. He kept emphasizing that this wasn't a situation where we were prolonging the inevitable like Mom claimed. This was stopping a treatment that was actively working and condemning me to death when I had every chance of living. The way he said it, flat and factual and angry, made everything feel more real than Mom's fake concerned voice had. Judith Green showed up less than an hour later, a woman who looked to be in her 40s with tired eyes and a no-nonsense way of moving. She carried a legal pad and introduced herself as the hospital social worker, then pulled a chair up close to my bed and sat down like she had all the time in the world. She told me she'd handled cases like mine before, and something about the way she said it made me believe her. She asked me to start from the beginning and walk her through my family situation, everything that led to this moment. For the first time in my life, an adult was actually listening, not interrupting, not making excuses, just taking notes and nodding while I talked. She had this way of looking at me that made it clear she believed every word, that she wasn't going to dismiss this as teenage drama or family disagreement. When I paused, she asked specific questions about timing, about patterns, about how long things had been this way. I told her everything, and the words came easier than I expected. The spelling bee party with 50 guests and a 3-tier cake versus my science fair trophy that I carried home in the rain because they forgot to pick me up. Jackson's nursery with hand-painted murals compared to my dresser drawer and hand-me-down blankets. The MIT summer camp I couldn't attend because Mom wouldn't miss one of his baseball games to drive me 3 hours. The $40,000 college fund she bragged about for Jackson, while telling relatives I'd probably get scholarships since I was the bookish one. Judith wrote it all down without changing expression. Just asked how old I was when different things happened, how often they missed my events, whether anyone else witnessed the favoritism. She wanted to know about the 3 months when they actually showed up during chemo, then asked what changed when Jackson got into Columbia. I explained about the acceptance letter and Mom sitting on my hospital bed the very next day to tell me they were stopping my treatment. Judith set down her pen and explained that parents legally control medical decisions for minors, which I already knew from my research. But then she said there are emergency provisions in the law for situations where guardians make choices that actively endanger a child's life. She used the term medical neglect, and my stomach flipped because that meant officially accusing my parents of harming me. It meant making this a legal thing, not just a family disagreement. Judith could see my reaction, and she explained that medical neglect isn't about intent, it's about outcome. If a parent denies necessary life-saving treatment to a child, that's neglect regardless of their reasons. She said the courts take these cases seriously because they involve a minor who can't advocate for themselves. Except I was advocating for myself now, and she was going to help me do it properly. Judith pulled out her phone and started making a list of what she needed to gather. My complete medical records from diagnosis through current treatment, the full treatment protocol showing what came next, and Dr. Stone's professional medical opinion about what happens if chemo stops now. She said she also needed to contact the hospital ethics committee, because this situation involved life or death decision-making authority being used against a patient's wishes. The ethics committee could review whether my parents' choice constituted medical neglect and make recommendations to family court. She explained this would all happen fast, within days, not weeks, because the timeline mattered. Every day we waited was a day closer to my next scheduled chemo cycle, and we needed legal clarity before that appointment. She asked if I was sure I wanted to move forward with this because once we started the process, it would get messy and my parents would know I went to the hospital staff. I told her I was sure because the alternative was dying, and I'd spent 17